And you'll notice that our music director, Elliot Dickinson's got the Sunday off, so Tana McEwing is sitting in. McEwen. And of course, we've always got Alvon on drums and Michael Hilson back there on guitar. So yeah. Yeah. Before we start, I wanted to... Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Chris Meyer on trumpet. I really do love you. I just saved you for last. Before we start, a couple of things I wanted to point out. First of all, I wanted to thank our spiritual healers and chaplains. I don't have a chance to thank you guys that much. Valerie Ward and Bronwyn. They're both Reiki practitioners, and I know Valerie actually teaches, Reiki as well. I know we've got a couple other volunteers occasionally who aren't here today, Rama, Amber, people like that. But I do appreciate you guys holding the high watch week after week and giving people prayer support or spiritual healing treatments. Second was that, last week we had our big giveaway freebie thing where, we set up all of the tables out there, and our declutter team has just been amazing. And for the people who put in all of the effort last week, I want to thank Kathy Arnold, Rondi Abbott, Elliot Dickinson, Charles Gentles, Linda Garston, Cynthia Marshall, and Michael and Trish Sandbag. And then, of course, the team leader is Vivian Merck, who's just doing an amazing job. I really appreciate it. And this week, they spent some time pruning down the library. We've got a good selection of books in the library, but there were some that had 5 copies. So what we did was we've taken them and we've put them on a table in the fellowship hall. And they're there for the taking. Go check them out. Great Unity books. So if you want them, or if you think somebody who might like them, it's a gift or whatever, just go ahead and grab whatever speaks to your soul and just hand them out. Kind of raise our profile, so to speak. In 2 weeks, on September 1st, I'm going to do a question and answer Sunday service. If you want to submit your questions in advance, you can send me an email. My email's on the back of the bulletin. And then next week, like we did back on July 21st, we'll put a piece of paper in the bulletin. You can write out your question that way. I can spontaneously answer one, and then, like I said, I'll just kind of go through the others and give you a chance to ask what you really want, what you really want to hear about, or if you've got a certain situation in your life, you're trying to figure out how do I approach this spiritually. And then last, I've got, in 2 weeks also on September 1st, we're going to change the order of service so that our children are in here with us at the beginning, and then we will bless them like we usually do at the end of the service, and then they will go off to youth and family ministry. And this will accomplish a few things. One, of course, is that Emma won't have to be trying to anticipate when the service is going to end. We usually text her, a few minutes ahead of time. But also just for security's sake, the kids will then be over there, and the parents can go over there, to find the children. So we did send, Emma off to Unity Village, here at the end of July for a 1-week intensive on training and getting together with other youth directors. So we're trying to apply some of the best practices, that she learned. So as we're always kind of experimenting, seeing what we can do and what we can do better. So let's get on with the lesson. Good morning. So, when Carla and I were living up in Chicago for a while before we came down here, I read online this story that this girl talked about, and then the story is basically about 2 girls, a teenager and a 6-year-old. And Lauren in Western Springs, Illinois, which is one of the suburbs out west, as you can imagine. She was talking about how she had this wonderful experience that summer. She had been an intern at a summer camp, and the kids would come in for a week. And one of her jobs was to kind of help out at the pool. They had the lifeguard, but the lifeguard needed to kind of focus on the pool and the kids in the water. And so hers was to kind of watch, the kids and stuff outside of the water. And she noticed something this one week. This girl, about 6 years old, went up to the 10-foot diving board, climbed up the ladder, went out to the end of the diving board and just kind of stood there for a while, and then she'd turn around and go back and walk down the ladder. And she did this every day until finally the last day she sees her going up again. And then the girl goes to the end of the diving board, and she's standing there, and she's looking, and then suddenly she jumps, does a cannonball in the water, and comes out exhilarated. Yes, I did it. And Lauren couldn't help but, go and ask the girl afterwards. I said, what changed? I've been watching you all week. She said, yeah, I just didn't want to walk down that ladder again. And of course, there's the idea of, are we going towards pleasure, or are we avoiding pain in our decisions? And so, yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of we get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And for this little girl, so there was that realization, okay, I've come to the edge, whatever it was, 4 or 5 times this week, and now I'm finally ready. And that's what happens with a lot of us. And as you see, the title of the lesson today is Going to the Edge. And as I was talking with a few people this week about having chosen this topic, I understand that it can be perceived a number of different ways. And part of it was, Mary choosing the cover picture today for the bulletin, going to the edge of the water. So yeah, that's another way you can go to the edge. Obviously, you can go to the edge of the diving board, or go to the edge of a cliff. You can go to the border of another territory or another state. That's another edge. But it's a matter of, just getting to the edge of perhaps what we know or what we can see, and then being willing to move off into new territory. And there are so many times we have to do this, but, the fear kind of creeps in. If we open our mind to the divine mind in those situations, though, and get that divine download, we're always connected to the divine mind. It's just most of the time we're just unconscious of it. And as I say, there's the divine ideas that we can download. And then all we need to do is just believe that divine ideas exist, and then be willing to express the ones that come to us, and we recognize are the right ones for us to express. What is ours to do in any particular situation? I wanted to unspool, some Bible verses today, which I try to do as often as I can. It's from the Hebrew Scriptures, formerly known as the Old Testament. There's the second book, which is Exodus, and it's mainly the story, of Moses and the Israelites being slaves in Egypt. And of course, you go through all of the things where, Moses goes to the Pharaoh and says, let my people go, kind of a thing. And then, of course, God gives all of these various uncomfortable unpleasantries to the Egypt until finally the Pharaoh lets them go. And we're told, of course, that they wandered in the desert for 40 years after crossing the Red Sea. But when we go forward a couple of books in the Bible to the book of Numbers, we get the rest of the story. In chapters 13 and 14, they say that Moses led the people out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, but then they went straight to the Promised Land. But they got to the border. They got to the edge. And Moses told the 12 tribes of Israel to each choose a person that they can trust to go scout out the new territory. It's like, well, we're not going to go in there until we know, is it safe? Can we do this? And so they sent 12 representatives into the Promised Land. And they spent 40 days checking everything out. And they came back, the 12 of them. And they came back talking about, oh, it's wonderful, it's flowing with milk and honey, and look at these grapes, all of these vines of grapes and pomegranates and other things that they describe. So yeah, it's a wonderful place. But, and then 10 of the 12 are saying, these guys are huge, they've got fortified cities. I mean, to us, to them we probably look like grasshoppers. We can't do it. But then there were 2 guys, Joshua and Caleb, that said, well, what are you talking about? We can do this. We can do this. We should go ahead. Well, Jehovah, who was the perception of God at the time, is saying, well, you guys have really disappointed me, so now I'm going to have to punish you, and you will now wander in the desert for 40 years. And what happens is they wait until all of the naysayers have died off. And after 40 years, Joshua and Caleb lead them into the Promised Land. So there are narrative stories in the Bible that are rich in symbolism. We call it metaphysical Bible interpretation. So any group, any people, persons, groups of people, cities, even carts and that sort of thing have symbolism to them. And so let's unspool some of these. Of course, there's the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 scouts. This is the first representation of 12, which we know as the 12 powers of man. The 12 apostles represent aspects within ourselves, faculties, spiritual gifts that God has given to us. And if you're not familiar with them, let me run through them really quickly. Each of us has faith, spiritual strength, wisdom, love, spiritual power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, renunciation, and life. And the symbolism there is Jesus went and gathered these 12 when he began his mission, so to speak. We can gather these 12 aspects within ourselves and move to a whole higher level of consciousness. So Joshua and Caleb represented faith and zeal. Zeal is the aspect of ourselves that just moves forward with enthusiasm. And then of course faith, Joshua leading them, and we just need to have faith that everything's going to be all right. And as it mentions, the naysayers had to die off. Well, people, when they talk about people in general, represent, our thoughts and our feelings. So we had these other 10 that just couldn't do it, just couldn't see doing it. And then suddenly, they find that they could have done it. And they finally did. And the scouts told them about the land. And in the book of Numbers, 13th chapter, 28th verse, it says, "Yet the people who will dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negrib. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan River." All of these group of peoples have connotations to them. It's like you look at, well, especially when you look at these days, cities have certain connotations to them. We've got, when you think of San Francisco, what do you think? When you think of Miami, what do you think? What do you think of Chicago, my hometown, or Tampa? Or St. Pete. They all had these connotations to them. Now also think about Newton, Columbine, some of these other cities that have gone through, their. So each of these cities and each of these group of peoples has their representation. Now Egypt. Moses led the people out of Egypt. Now Moses represents that aspect of drawing out the best in us. So Moses draws us out of Egypt. Egypt represents the land of ignorance of spirituality. It's totally about materialism. They're led to the promised land, which is Canaan, and Canaan is the subconscious mind. It's the lowlands there near the sea. The number 40 is repeated twice here, right? 40 days, 40 years, and you see it a lot in the Bible. What it means is as long as it takes to build a strong foundation, your square foundation or rectangle foundation is the strongest. And then they talked about these groups of people and all of that. So let me just go down the list of what they represent and see if this is happening. And here again, all of these stories of the Bible are happening within us. These are struggles that we have. So we've gotten to the point where we're ready to take our spirituality, our consciousness to a new level, but we're a little bit scared. So these people, these things that they encountered in the new land was the worship of materialism, the belief that materialism is reality and that there's no need to live a spiritual life, the fear of change, especially giving up materialism for spiritual awareness, that spark of spiritual awareness being overrun by fear, animal forces, appetites, and passions, and then the pièce de résistance, the misuse of sexual appetite. That's this list of people, when you look them up in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, it's like, that's what they meant. So we carry this forward. It's like, okay, we're finally ready to embrace that we're not just human beings, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. But all of these things that we've learned start to surface. It's like, well, wait a minute. What about this material world, this physical world? Are we willing to get to the promised land? We have to be willing to see these things surface in our minds and say, oh, yeah, I don't have to live my life that way anymore. I don't have to believe that anymore. I don't have to express that in the world anymore. So what's holding us back? You know, have you ever had the experience of facing a challenge where it looked like you were dealing with giants, and that committee you've got in your own mind, there's 10 votes for no, 2 votes for yes? And what do you do in that situation? You know, sometimes you just need to wander in the desert until you're ready to move forward. What is our promised land? What is our vision for ourselves as individuals and for us as a group? In 1964, as some of you probably remember, Walt Disney announced that he had bought all of these acres of land in Central Florida and was going to open Walt Disney World. And it turned out to be a 7-year building project, and he died 2 years later in 1966. But his brother Roy and his wife and widow Lillian carried on the project, and they finally opened it in 1971. And there was a man talking with Roy and Lillian for the opening ceremonies that they had, and this person said to the two of them, oh, if only Walt Disney could have seen this. And Lillian and Roy looked at each other and looked at the man and said, he did see this. This was his vision. The only reason this is here is because he saw it. So, as I said just a moment ago, what is your promised land? What do you see? What are you willing to do to allow that vision to unfold in your world? And are you ready to take the risks to get there? Recently, a Unity minister was telling me about this personality test that she took. And, she was with a group of people, and they filled out these questions with multiple answers. Then at the end, the leader kind of had people kind of go through the questions and graded them. One of the questions, though, that really jumped out at her was, I make my decisions based on a guaranteed outcome. And the 4 choices were often, usually, sometimes, or never. And this particular Unity minister was thought, well, you know, when I feel divinely guided, I move forward with something, so I'm going to put sometimes. And the leader just kind of took the various answers that people gave and then pointed out, we never have a 100% guarantee of an outcome. There are no guaranteed outcomes. It's always possible that something else might happen. You know, even on a roulette wheel, people say, well, you know, you got a 50% chance because there's red and black. It's like, no, there's that green double zeros down there at the end. That's always that thing that might happen. But can we hold to the faith, can we allow our faith to kind of lead us if we have a vision and we're willing to step out and take that risk? Many of you have heard that, out of the Course in Miracles comes the tradition of, are you coming from love or are you coming from fear when you make your decisions? Of course, like people think love and hate, but it's like, no, hate is a reaction to fear. When someone's feeling fear and they decide they want to try to exhibit power and get that power back, they exhibit hate. But there is another tool besides love and fear, and that is faith, allowing us to move forward. There's a saying that there's a saying that fear knocked at the door, but they sent faith to answer the door, and nothing was there. Faith can dissolve fear. And faith is defined in the Bible, in the letter to the Hebrews, 11th chapter, 1st verse. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So yeah, we may not see it at the very moment, but we're willing to have faith that it's going to materialize or that it's on its way here. And Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew, 17th chapter, 20th verse, I say to you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. Mustard seeds are about the size of a pinhead. Yeah, when you plant it and nurture it, it grows a bush that's about 5 feet tall and probably about 10 feet around. So, Ray Bradbury, the science fiction writer, wrote, "You have to jump off cliffs all the time. You build your wings on the way down." Now let me be clear. I'm not telling you to take random risks or uninformed risks. But if you are divinely guided that this is the risk you need to take, go for it. Meditate, pray, do your homework. I had an interesting experience back in 1990. Have you ever walked on a hot beach or a hot sidewalk? You get off of it as quickly as you can. But at this retreat in 1990, they were going to have a fire walk at the end of the retreat. And we got to help build this fire walk, rather than there being rocks and stuff in it that some people have said that's the reason you can walk across. It's like, no, this was walking right on the coals. We built this bonfire. We came back later as it was burning all down, and then they raked out, all of these hot coals, about a 15-foot runway. And then we kind of would walk around it in a circle, kind of in a meditative state, singing some songs and all that. And then when each of us felt ready, you'd walk up to the end of this runway and walk. And so, I came walking up, and I just felt this confidence, this like, yes, I need to do this. I need to prove to myself that I can do this. And I walked slowly down the 15 feet. And then afterwards, I was just amazed because, I did it, and yet on the top of my big toe on my right foot, I felt pain. And I talked to one of the coaches about what I had experienced. He says, "Well, what did you believe when you were walking down the runway?" I said, "Wow, I'm walking down hot coals." He says, "Well, that little patch on the top of your big toe is feeling those hot coals." And it was a sense of like, I expected it to be hot, so I had to express it somewhere. It was on the top of my big toe where I singed some little hairs and stuff that were there. But the bottom of my feet were fine. Another misunderstanding of the unity teaches is that whenever we step out in faith and we get resistance, what do? Some people say, well, if we're getting resistance, that means we're not supposed to do that. It's like, not necessarily. There's a concept that's called the third force. We got first force, second force, and third force. The first force is when we take a step in that direction. The second force is this surfacing of all our old beliefs, all of our old experiences that comes up, that's in opposition to what it is we're trying to do. And that's our opportunity, as I mentioned before, of like, okay, suddenly this fear surfaces and we have the opportunity to look at it and say, whoa, yeah, I did experience that 20 years ago, but now I know that isn't true. Or now I know it's time for me to prove that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. So we keep on walking, and sure enough, that resistance drops away. And a simple example I use often is, let's say, I'm here, I'm thirsty, and I want some water. Say to so-and-so, Joe, would you go get me a glass of water? And Joe says, right on, I'll go. Well, I'm standing here, I haven't got a glass of water yet because it's on its way. But sure enough, Joe comes and brings me the water. And now that I'm talking about water, I need to have some water, as all of you probably do. So there is a natural thing that happens, this resistance. I remember reading a book back in like the 1980s from the president of Swiss Airlines, and he said, run through walls. If it looks like a wall, go ahead and run into it to see, is it an illusion or is there really a wall? He says, and what I find is that 99% of the time it's an illusion. And then that 1% of the time where I do hit the wall, I recognize, okay, then I need to turn left. So, all right, well, if God is all-powerful, everywhere present, and all-knowing, are we willing to step out and recognize that we are part of that God presence, and that we are guided by that God presence? Think about Jesus Christ. Did Jesus Christ experience any resistance? we read these 4 Gospels about how many times he did experience resistance. And yet, he gave us this philosophy that we live by. He's trying to teach us what it is we need to do to live a spiritual life. In the book A Deep Breath of Life, Alan Cohen tells the story of a woman who was a good violinist. And so she wanted to get a good violin. And she discovered that a Stradivarius was for sale. And she went into meditation about what she should do. And her guidance was very clear. Sell your house, buy the violin. She bought the violin. And it just upped her game. She took her consciousness to a whole new level. And as Alan Cohen describes, within a year or 2, she was able to buy a much nicer home. But she was willing to step out in faith at the beginning of recognizing what she needed to do to raise her game. She believed that Stradivarius would do that. And that's what it really comes down to. What do you believe is going to happen if you do this? And if you know in your heart, it's stuck with you. It's not just a passing whim. It's kind of, this is what I need to do. I need to write this book. I need to get this college degree. I need to fill in the blank. Alan Cohen also mentioned in his book that all real healing happens when we step outside of our comfort zone. That means risk. That means that you're going to be not comfortable. There may be some unpleasantness there. And sometimes life comes along and reminds us that we're not following through on our vision. That spiritual 2x4 to the back of the head. Some sort of strife hits our life. But as Ray Bradbury says, we build our wings on the way down. So, are we playing it safe? What is our comfort zone? What is our promised land? What area of our life? Is it relationships, occupation, health, finances, spiritual awareness? What do you need to do to move forward, to take it to a new level? I'm going to have Duncan put up our takeaways for the week. And as always, there's some copies out there on the credenza. So where is your edge? Where is your comfort zone? Are we coming from love or are we coming from fear in any decision? Are we expressing faith after we make that decision? What is our promised land? What do we need to do? Be willing to anticipate the second force, that resistance that always arises when we set out in a new adventure. Be willing to take a risk. And then finally, remember that whatever we focus on expands. And remember Ray Bradbury's comment, you have to jump off cliffs all the time, but we build our wings on the way down. Our video this week is about a man who found the edge in the strangest of places.
I really want to be a doctor when I grow up.
Whenever his 2 little girls play doctor and dream of becoming one someday,
Let me take your heartbeat, doctor.
48-year-old master mechanic Carl Allenby is flooded with the feeling of deja vu.
You wanted to be a doctor?
Oh, yeah.
But that wasn't realistic.
Not where I came from, no. I grew up in East Cleveland, which is a very impoverished city. We were on welfare, and I remember the powdered milk, government powdered milk and block cheese.
And because they were so poor, young Carl quickly set aside his professional aspirations and focused instead on becoming the best auto mechanic he could be.
So this was a parts store where I got all my customers from.
So you would work on cars in the parking lot of the parts store?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Eventually, he got his own shop. And for 15 years, he did okay. Until one day, he decided to ratchet things up.
In 2006, Carl enrolled here at Ursuline College. His intention was to get a business degree to help him manage his repair shop. But there was one hurdle, a biology class. He couldn't understand why he had to take it, and he put it off as long as possible.
I'm a business major.
Yeah.
What do I even care about biology? But I went to class, and in the first hour of being there, I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. All those ideas of wanting to be a doctor just came rushing back.
And to make a long story short, the car doctor
Dr. Carl Allenby.
is now a doctor.
Daddy, we love you!
Last spring, Carl graduated from Northeast Ohio Medical University, and today he's an emergency medicine resident at Cleveland Clinic Akron General.
Hey, Miss Fior.
By all accounts, Carl is already an exemplary doctor, partly because, according to his supervisors, he worked so long in a garage.
That cannot translate.
You'd be shocked, actually. I think it's some of the customer service.
This is Dr. Rebecca Merrill.
But could you imagine right now going and learning auto mechanics?
No. But Carl said he'll do our oil changes, so.
Fortunately, Carl now has more important repairs on his mind. But this old auto mechanic also knows that whether you're working under a hood or staring down a hatch,
Can I have you open up your mouth really wide?
your success hinges on your drive.
I would hear people say, well, Carl, it's going to take 9 years to become a doctor. Yeah. And I'd say, well, 9 years are going to pass anyway. So I'd rather be someplace I want to be than someplace that I could have been.
And there's the prescription
Yeah.
for the I can't do it blues. Steve Hartman, on the road in Akron, Ohio.
This week we'll close with a poem by Christopher Logue.